All right, so let's make the weirdo object that is for the last assignment with game 110. This object I designed so that it would cover a lot of issues, and you would learn about booleans, about snapping, about manifold objects, about different kinds of UV mapping, a lot of basic actions that you're going to use over and over and over again when you're in my other classes, the character modeling and environment modeling. So let's get right to it. All right. So normally I use the pop-up menu, but annoyingly, having the screen at this low resolution, I have to use the main menu, just to give you a heads up there. All right, so first let's talk about booleans and how to use them. It's not like booleans like in a programming sense of just a true or a false. I guess you could think of it like that if you wrote it out logically. But anyways, the booleans are essentially taking two objects and either cutting one out or union, combining them. But it's a combine that's a destructive combine, so that it removes all of the inside surface. I'll show you what I mean by this. Remember also that the manifold objects, I'll talk about that in a second. So booleans, let's get to this. So we create first a cube, then we create a cylinder. We're going to scale down this cylinder so that it's just poking straight through. Then let's select both these objects. Let's press Control D, and then we're going to move it next to itself. So this one we're going to do as a difference. So the order of operations with a Boolean is important. The first one you select is the one that gets cut, and the second one is the one that does the cutting. So we select the cube first, we hold down Shift and select the cylinder. Then we go to Mesh, Booleans, Difference. And now you can see that we've cut straight through the cube. Also keep in mind that if I select one of these faces, that we've added a lot of verts to it. So now it's what's called an n-gon, which is a polygon with more than 4 verts. If I go into Edit Mesh, nope. If I go into Mesh and Triangulate, and I do that for both of these guys, you can see just all of the how many edges are being hidden. Just a good thing to know. And let's go to the second one. We select this cube, Shift select the cylinder, then we go to Booleans and Union. Now, if I press 4, I can see the one that is the difference has the inside surface cut by the object, and the one that's the union has no inside surface. So it's merged all these guys together. So this also doesn't mean that combine is the same thing as a Boolean. Combine just puts two objects together. The Boolean will cut certain parts out. So there's no reason to use a Boolean if you can just do a combine. So with that in mind, let's new the scene. And let's start on the weirdo object. So we first create a cylinder, and we're going to change the number of axes here to 12. Right now it's 20, and you can see that if we go to Inputs. Remember to have your channel box open. We go to Inputs, we click on Polycylinder 1. I have to scroll down because the resolution is so low. Subdivision axes, I'm going to change to 12, and now you can see that it's gone down much greater. Also, it's determined that these edges are don't need to be smoothed. With 20, it would smooth all of the edges. They were obtuse enough that it would smooth them. We'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, now we go to Create, and we go to Cone, and let's move that up above it. And you can see again we have 20 sides on the cone. We only have 12 on the cylinder. We want to make sure that these match up, because when we stick them together and when we merge the verts, that we don't have any seams and they all match up. So let's change the axes there. So in the channel box, you go to polycone 1, and we change 20 to 12, and now we're matching. So as I started to talk about the manifold geometry, I also talked about in class the the chocolate Easter bunny that you might remember, that has it looks like a lot of chocolate, but when you bite into it, it's hollow inside. So it's a good way of thinking of what manifold geometry is that it's just enclosed. So if we have a seam, that's not manifold. It's not what Maya wants, or it's not really the kind of object that you want to export a good amount of the time. So let's go and press F11 and delete the underside of that cone, and then we're going to select the top of this cylinder. We can either do this by just selecting the all these faces here, holding down Control and deselecting the side faces. That's how we get that. Or we can hold down Tab and we can just draw along the top. Make sure you don't miss one. And delete the top. Go back into object mode with F8. Now we need to change the center point for this cone. And to do that, we hold down D. I do it with my middle finger, and then I hold down V for vert snap, and then we're going to grab this axis up here and aim it at one of these verts at the bottom. So D changes the center point, V snaps it to a vert, and so I clicked and I held only onto this one axis. That way it wouldn't snap to a single vert there. It just sampled what the Y value was. And with that set, then I hold down V, and again I click on this top axis. I aim it at one of the verts on the top of the cylinder, and then I shift click the cylinder itself, and then I combine these guys. So combine, and there we have it. Now we do have some history here. You can see that, and let's go to Edit, Delete by Type, and History, and that deletes all our history there. So now it's just an enclosed shape, clean outliner. And now let's take this shape and press Control D, and we duplicate it, and we move that over there. Now we need to make the this little cylinder that goes between them. So we create a new cylinder. We move it in between. We're going to change the axes to 12. Click on that. Scroll down. Change that to 12. And then I press E for rotate. Rotate it on its side. Scroll up to our rotate Z. And I can see it's minus 88. But I want to change that to minus 90. And now we have our cylinder on its side. Now we press R for scale. I'm going to scale this into a bit of a pole like that. And then I'm going to pull it into each of the objects. So this is where, if I go into wireframe, you can see it has the inner surface for it. Combine wouldn't work here. I don't want you to use combine. I want you to use a boolean on this. So since we're going to do a union, the order doesn't matter. So we can just select all of them, we can go to Mesh, Booleans, Union, and now you can see that it's deleted all of the inside surface. You can see we're still in the operation here, so if I press W, we complete it. We also have some history now, so the best way to clean that up, you always want to delete your history after you do a Boolean operation. We're going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, and History. All right. So we have that going. Let's see what's next. What's next is to do the torus, or the donut. So for this, we're just going to make a polygon primitive of a torus. It shows up. Move it out of the way. Now you can see this has too many axes. It's not going to match up if we try to snap it over there. So again, we need to go to Inputs, Polytorus, but we have subdivision axes and height at 20. Both of these need to be set to 12. All right. So now, looking at the torus, I'm going to look at it a little bit from the top, like so. I'm going to go into face mode with F11. And then I just do a marquee right around these bottom faces right there. And I delete them. And there's half of our donut. We have a hole here and a hole here. We only want to have a cap on one side because we're going to connect it over there. So let's go into edge mode, which is F10. I click on only one edge, and then I bring up a context menu, and that's Shift, right mouse button, and then I go down to fill hole. So that's a very useful action. It won't work if your verts are not merged. So if it doesn't work, you might have some unmerged verts there. Not in this instance because you didn't do any actions to warrant that. We'll go back into object mode. We'll go back to our weirdo shape. And now let's go into multi-cut mode. So that's Shift, or Control, Shift, and X. And now we can see that we're ready to start cutting. We could just cut willy-nilly, try to get as good as possible, but let's do it a little bit more exact. And if you hold down Shift, you will have a stepping amount. So it'll go directly to the middle, usually as the default. So I click once there, I've started cutting, and I keep holding Shift down, and I click, and I click, and now I'm going to just keep moving the perspective window around while I'm cutting, or in between each cut, and this will cut it. Normally you can use Control when you're doing this, but since it's on a cone, and I press Enter at the end to complete it, and then W to get out of the tool. Normally you can use Control to do an extra edge loop, but with a cone, Maya doesn't really know what to do with it. So, all right, so we have that right side done. We'll go into face mode, and we'll select that top bit, and we'll delete it. Now we have a hole right there, and you can see where this is going. We select our torus. Now we need to move the center point to one of these verts over here. So we hold down D, we hold down V, and I aim it at that vert. It should be right on the side, just right in the middle on the side there. Now I hold down V for vert snap. I aim it right on the corresponding vert on that side. I start rotating it with E. You can see rotate X is changing. And get it close to 90 as I can, and then I just change that number to 90. All right, so everything should line up if you did everything along the axis, as long as you didn't rotate it in a strange direction. And then we hold down Shift, and we click the rest of the object, and then we go to Mesh and Combine. And now they're all combined. However, we still have to merge these verts because we have a seam. So undo that. Go into object mode, and then we go to edit mesh, and then the option box of merge, which is right here. That brings up the option box. We want to make sure that the threshold is 0.005 and merge. So everything is now merged. If I go over here and I click on one of these guys, you can see that there's no more seam. And with that, we delete our history. So edit, delete by type, history, and now it's a clean object. All right. So that's the first part of this. Now the second part, we're going to UV it. And I'm going to pause this for 1 sec and get on to that one. All right, so let's get to UV mapping this. So we've already seen automatic mapping, and automatic mapping, it's not a panacea. It's just, you know, it's kind of like a temporary placing a shader onto your object. So you want to use it very infrequently. The one I use the most is normal based mapping, and basically what that is it recognizes where the normal is. So we talked about in class, say we have a face that's like this, the normal comes out like that. So it calculates using the normal of the face, and it places the texture on it according to that. There's other ones. If we look at our modeling editors, there is, let's make this a little smaller. There's cylindrical, which we're going to go over. Planar, which is also good, but normal based again is almost always better and easier to use, just one click. Never used spherical. Camera based is pretty useless. Never used contour, stretch, or best plane. So normal based and cylindrical are pretty much the only ones that I really use. And then there's a lot of unfolding and cutting and some sewing, but we'll get into that later. So let's start, and also looking at this, we can see that we have some, it's kind of a mess, but this is the result of the default UVs that are already placed on the objects. So when we've cut them and we've moved them around, it's, it leaves us with that. So we're going to add new UVs. And every time we add a new UV map, we're going to just move that off to the side. So let's start with the easiest ones. We go to F11 and we select the bottom ones. And I just held down tab to do that. And then we click normal based. So there we are. There's our first two. Move those off to the side. Then we're going to do a cylindrical map. So a cylindrical map is obviously what we use for cylinders. And make sure that all the faces are selected. And you apply it, and now you get to see yet another gizmo. So this gizmo is the placing UV gizmo. You'll see it in some other UV tools. And let's turn on our checkerboard here so we can see what it's doing. So we have here these little handles. If we grab onto these over here, then we'll pull it down, and it will cause the UV map to tile a little bit. If we grab on this, we'll cause it to tile also. But we can also pull it all the way around to the back, and then it won't tile at all. It'll just have the UV map just right in that square right there. Then we also can change around the rotation of it. you'll notice it's very faint, but there's a red line that goes all the way around this axis. So if we click on that, we can move our UV map around the cylinder. And one other thing too that's important to know is seams. So you can see that the seams by a white line, a light white bold line. I want the seam to go straight down in the middle here, and this is the seam right over here. So in order to get that seam over there, that axis I was telling you about, this very faint red one, I'm going to move it until I can see that seam move. So you can see the seam is moving along there, and now it's in the right spot that I want it to be in. Alright. Now if you accidentally get out of this gizmo, it's pretty easy to get out of it. You click it off it, or you press W, it might go out of it. I don't remember. Nope, you can't do it. I thought for a second there you might actually be able to undo and get back into it, but you can't. So I pressed undo. I'm going to go forward and get back to that seam that I had over there. Alright, so that one's set there. I don't like how it's kind of stretched. In that regard, I can grab it and I can move it out of the way, move it off like I was saying, and I'm going to turn on our checkerboard, and I'm going to stretch it down, squish it down a little bit so that the squares are a little bit more square, like that. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. So F11, make sure everything's selected. Go over here, cylindrical. We have our cylinder map. I can see the seam is out here on the back. I'm going to grab onto this very faint red one. I'm going to move that right along there so that the seam is right on the back. So I don't even need a texture for this because I just want to make sure that the UVs are set up. And we're not actually going to be putting a texture on it. I just want to make sure that you have the UV set up properly. Okay, so now we have other ones that are here. Now we have the middle one, and that's also a cylinder. But watch what happens when I add a cylindrical map to this. It's oriented in the wrong orientation there. So we need to rotate that, this little gizmo. And to do that, there's a little T down here. I don't know why they make them so small, but whatever. Little tiny T. So if I click on that T, I get this other gizmo over here. And I click on the blue one to go into the next mode, and now I have a rotation gizmo. So I know it's a little bit weird, but bear with me. You'll get used to it, and it gets super easy. I've been using this for a long while. So I just moved it so that the rotate X is now minus 91. I just put in minus 90, and now that's at a right angle. Now I grab onto this axis and I move that along there so that it's at 90. And now we have the orientation correct to go around that cylinder. So in order to get back to our other gizmo, if I click on this, it will toggle it back to our previous looking gizmo. And here I can grab this, rotate it all the way down. I can grab this, I can move it out to the extents where it's close enough to the to the edges. So now I press W, we're done. I move it out of the way, and we have a new map. Now I look at the squares on this, and it's a little different from that one. I'm just going to make it a little smaller so it matches a little bit better, so it has the same textile density. And there we go. Alright, okay, so our textile density on that other one is not so good. I'm going to go into UV shell mode by clicking in the gray area of the UV editor and click on this guy. And there is our UV shell. I'm going to scale that down so that it's close to the size of this one. Just put it up there out of the way. It's pretty close. All right, so the other ones, how do we get these? This one, you can't really use a cylindrical map on this because it gets smaller up here. So it's going to squish the UVs. So what we want to use for this one is a normal based UV map, and I'll just go ahead and click on it, show you what it looks like. We click, we get this shape. I'm going to turn that off. So you can see it's this shape, so that means that it figured that the best way to UV it was just straight down. We are going to get some stretching on that a little bit, as you can see. It looks a little funny. So to fix this, in some cases you might not want to fix it, but we're going to fix this. We're going to unwrap it so that it's really nice and everything is all the textile density is accurate. So we need to cut a seam. Seams I'll go into a lot more in character modeling. It's essentially like looking at a piece of clothing. You have like your arm. You might do like a cylinder map on something like that. I would do a normal map. But you might do any kind of map there. Then you find a seam that you want to cut, and you find it and you cut it, and then you unfold it. So we're only going to choose one seam, and I'm choosing this one because it's a continuation of this seam over here. So I selected that one. I go over to cut and sew, and I go to cut. So nothing's changed, but you can see now that we have a highlighted seam over there. So the next step is we select our UV shell, and we select that map there. Then we go down to unfold. So I'm going to move this off to the side so you can see this in action. Here's our object, and I go to expand unfold, and I click on unfold. And now you can see that it has expanded it like a fan. I'm just going to rotate it over like this so it looks a little better. Now if I turn on our checkerboard, we still have that seam, but all of our squares look a lot better. So that is much more appealing and works better for our object. Okay. Now let's do this side. So F11, select those faces, and if I turn this off, you can see this here. So this one, we could use a cylinder map, a cylindrical map, but like this, there's going to be some stretching going on, so we could use that. We might not want to use that. I don't know. Who knows? It's a mystery. But we could also just use the normal based texture map, and so I click on that and we get this. So you can see that it realized the best thing to do was aim downward, and then we have that hole right in the middle. So like we did with this one, we're going to press F10 to select that edge, and I'm going to go over to cut sew. I'm going to select cut, and we've cut that. Now we go like we did before. We right click, we go to UV shell, we click on our UV shell, we go back down here to unfold, and now we see that it's unfolded it. The unfold is very, very, very handy, and especially in character modeling when you're unfolding the face. That's another normal map. You select the edges, you cut it, and it just expands the face. It's pretty creepy looking, but it works well. Okay, so if we look at our checkerboard, we can see here that it's looking very nice, and nothing is stretched. The last thing to do, actually two things left to do. F11, we're going to select this cap. We're going to just click normal based, super easy, and we're going to make that smaller. Put it over there. Then the last part is we're going to select this torus. What in the world are we going to do with this one? So I do have a video called UV mapping virtually anything, and I go to I have another weirdo looking shape that I show you how to UV map. There's a few things that you could do, a lot of different things, but the easiest one is to do a normal map, cut a seam, and unfold it. So super easy. The other one we're not going to go into. It's, you might not even ever need to use it, but in some cases, if you have a tube or something like that that's moving, that's modeled so that it's I don't know how to say it. Like, say you had a snake, or say you had like a hose or something like that that's modeled. You would have to select certain edges in a certain fashion, and then using some cool techniques, you can actually stretch it all out. So the UV mapping, the UV editor is very handy for just UV mapping anything. It used to be that I would model something, and then I would move the model, change the shape of the model, and hope that the UVs didn't get messed up. That was a long time ago, but don't need to do that now. So we'll take this object and we'll do a normal based on it, and it looks pretty funny because it doesn't really know what to do. So it does look 3D there. So the way we fix this is we just go to our edge mode. We click on these edges, and I'm just shift clicking the rest of the edges, and I'm using the inside because I want to hide that seam. Some of the other ones, what can you do about it, really? So I'm hiding that seam inside there. I select cut so, and then I select cut, and I've cut that. I go just like I did before to UV shell. I click on the UV shell just like I did before, and then I go to unfold, and we get this. Now if I go into our checkerboard and I look at it, it is not stretched, so it looks good. I may want to make that a little smaller. There we are. So that's our object. Now the last step, and this is optional, but there's another tool that you can use that will automatically figure out what the right textile density should be, and it will lay it all out in this one little spot, and this is where your texture is going to be. It never fills out here because it's 0, 0, and 1 to 1, so it's always going to be the biggest. That's going to be the biggest extent. So all of our UVs are going to generally go in here, unless we want to, make it a little bit clearer, or unless we're tiling something. So we go to a thing called layout, and layout is pretty handy. It's right at the bottom, close to the bottom, arrange and layout, and we click on layout, and here's what it does. It will rearrange everything. Some of it I don't like the way that it lays it out, but this is very handy if you're doing character modeling. You need to be able to get everything all laid out in a nice particular way. Sometimes what I find myself doing is making it a little smaller, and then I just lay it out in a way that is a little easier to paint. So the way sometimes, and you'll also do this with objects as well. You'll put together an object, you'll put all of the UVs all in just this one-to-one space, and then you'll just paint it in Photoshop, or in a more advanced way would be Substance Painter. So if we click on our tile, then we can see all the textile density is very similar, and it looks absolutely lovely. So that's all you need to do for this assignment. Oh, there's a couple other things. I lied. is we have a lot of history. So let's go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. And another nice thing to do is notice how we have all these hard edges. Let's smooth these edges out. And the only edges we're going to have are on our hard edges and where these guys connect. So I'm essentially, I'll do a good example here, an easy one. I'm in edge mode, so F10. I select all of these edges. I go to, let's see, mesh display. I go to soften edge. And now you'll notice that it looks the way it did when it was set at 20 axes. So this is all based on smoothing and normals, and then if I do the same for the rest, and I have to select that one too. Remember, a good key to use is G. So the last action you did, it will repeat it. So I did smooth edges. I just press G. It smooths the edges. Select those. Press G. Select these. Press G. Select these. Press G. Select these. Press G. And now we have a awesome little weirdo looking shape. So there you are. I hope that was helpful, and that you had you enjoyed the class. I tried to cram in as much as I could the last 2 weeks, just to get you ready for the next Maya class that you might take. So thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.